Hello and welcome to Superstars and Legends. This week with Peter Mears is Doug Walters.
Doug Walters, thanks very much for being with us on Legends.
Pleasure, Peter. Nice to be with you.
Mate, what are you doing these days? I see you on the speaking circuit. Anything apart from that?
Well, I do a lot of talking, but I do a lot of coaching during the school holidays. So coaching and talking, I guess, my two main things that keep me out of mischief or into mischief sometimes.
Is that the main involvement with cricket? Do you still enjoy watching the game?
Yeah, I do. I've got three boys that are all pretty keen on cricket, and they like watching the game, so it keeps me interested. The television's always on the cricket when it's on at home, so and we get out to the odd game every now and again as well.
The game's changed enormously since our day. What do you think of all the bribery and corruption and stuff that's going on at the moment? Must make your hair curl.
Well, I don't know whether the game has changed that much, really. They're still bowling a cricket ball the same size, and the bats are still the same size, and most of the rules are the same. So I don't think that it's changed that much. I mean, certainly the amount of money that they're making out of cricket has changed, but apart from that, I can't see a lot of changes.
Were you ever aware of any bribery or corruption in your day?
No, they could have got us very cheaply, I can tell you. No, there wasn't any sign of any of that going on when we played.
You never made a lot of money out of the game. What did you get for your first test match? Can you remember?
Yeah, actually, my first test match, we were paid £180, which went to, of course, $360 after that. So, and that, I suppose, in 1965 was pretty good money because I think I was earning about £3 or £4 a week working, so 180 quid in one go was really good. I mean, I bought a car out of my first series. I bought a Mini Minor, Mini Minor 1000, and that was what it cost, $1,000.
It was huge in those days, Doug. Being the same age, of course, I was a great fan of yours, and when you came along, it was like Normie O'Neill. It's another Bradman. Were you aware of that kind of hype that was around?
Not really. No, I'd seen and heard or read little bits and pieces, but I was pretty determined that that wasn't going to affect me.
Because I remember when you first played New South Wales Colts and you made 140 not out, and the next day the paper had all these terrific diagrams of you hitting sixes out of the ground, and one ended up in Kippax Lake, which is about 60 metres outside the ground. Is that true?
Well, so the photo said, and the ball did come back wet, so I guess it did end up in the lake, but it must have got a few favourable bounces on the way. I mean, there used to be a wall about 8 or 10 foot high, I suppose, around the Sydney Cricket Ground number 2, right next door to the number 1, where they now practice. And, well, I guess it's part of the football stadium as well these days. But yeah, the ball went over the fence, and I must have landed on Driver Avenue and a couple of other paths on the way over. The ball was wet when it come back, so those sixes, they get a bit bigger and they go a little further every year.
What I loved about the way you played the game was your acceptance of success or failure the same. Was that ingrained into you by your dad or one of your coaches, or was that just the country way?
Well, I guess, well, we didn't have coaches as such in those days, so I suppose, yeah, my parents, I suppose, but yeah, more so, I think that was just a country attitude, and largely it still is.
What about the way you attacked? I mean, they said that if Walters stayed in for a couple of sessions, Australia would win a test match, because you always batted the same, didn't you?
Well, that was the way I preferred to bat. I mean, I started my career, in my junior career, all my success was with the ball, so I had to change, really, and it was up. I'd played my second Shield game against Victoria, and I think I had figures of none for 128. And I thought, boy, if I'm going to stick around this level of cricket, I've got to concentrate a bit harder on the batting. So, as I said, all my junior success was with the ball, and we were probably only chasing 15 or 16 runs, and I was batting number 8 or number 9, so I didn't get too many hits when you're only chasing that many runs. So when I did get a go, I enjoyed batting and throwing the bat around, and I suppose that kept me in good stead right through my career.
Did you ever change? Because I remember in England you had a couple of unsuccessful tours by your normal standards, and people were criticising you, and you actually got dropped from the test side once. Did you actually change your technique to try and amend the problems you had over there?
Well, I did. I mean, it was probably the second after the first year of World Series cricket, where Kerry Packer said to Ross Edwards and myself, we both had similar problems with a short pitch ball. He said, I want to see you two guys down at Barry Knight's next Friday night, or next Friday afternoon. And Barry had a centre in Pitt Street in Sydney here, and at 4 o'clock. So we arrived there just before 4 o'clock, and right on the dot of 4 o'clock in walked Kerry, threw his coat off and started throwing balls at us from halfway down the wicket, bounces. And he's got Barry on the video saying, well, you sort out their problems. And then for the next 6 months, we were on squash courts pretty close to where we both lived, in between the two of us, and we were throwing tennis balls at one another for an hour each twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And, you know, Kerry, not once did he miss ringing that squash centre to find out whether we were there or not. We never spoke to him on the phone, but he always rang the manager of the squash centre and asked me if we were there. So he was pretty keen, Kerry, and I suppose it did help. I mean, I didn't enjoy playing cricket the way that I had to play as a result of it. But the next season, or next couple of seasons, were quite successful. And I'd done it primarily to have another crack at England, but unfortunately that didn't eventuate.
Why do you think you were so successful on the hard wickets in Australia and over in the subcontinent, and yet in England you couldn't even get 100 in 4 tours?
Yeah, I still think I played some better cricket in England and against some county sides, but unfortunately not in the test matches. Well, I guess our wickets are a lot truer. They're quicker and truer. They don't seam around as much as they do in England, and the ball comes through a little quicker, which I preferred. England, you just have that little split second of time up your sleeve after the ball bounces, and I guess my eyes were pretty good. I could see it deviate one way or the other, and I had to chase it. And thereupon I ended up in a lot of trouble. Every time I went to the wicket I had 3 or 4 gullies saying hello, and very seldom did I let one of them down. And
snow had come on as soon as you came to the wicket, or Underwood? They seem to be your nemesis.
Well, yeah, they were both pretty good bowlers, mind you. I think they'd still make their mark in world cricket today, those two.
It was extraordinary how quickly you rose. I mean, was this natural ability? You played on an ant-bed pitch at home at Dungog. I remember it was just lots of cricket in the backyard. Was the way you did it?
Pretty much so. I mean, when I say we didn't have coaches, we didn't have coaches like we have these days, but I suppose my father was a coach, my school teachers were coaches, and a few of my teammates, I suppose. I mean, I regard the teammates being the best coaches, and I still have that opinion, even today, even at the top level. So I guess, yeah, a combination. They'd tell me what I was doing right or what I was doing wrong on occasions, and I suppose, yeah, I suppose I listened.
There were times when I thought you might have got emotional and you didn't, like in South Africa when you were given out caught at a vital stage in a test match, when the umpire went no and didn't quite go on with the ball, and you still walked out. I mean, did you get angry? Did you throw your bat?
No, I didn't. I mean, I don't recall ever throwing my bat after any decision, but yeah, that was, well, I was batting with Ian Redpath. Ian Redpath got quite upset with the umpire, who did, in fact. He called no. I mean, the ball before was, I just hit for 6. And this one was even a bigger half-tracker, so I was even more annoyed with myself for getting the top edge, and Graham Pollock had raced around him at the boundary and about 30 or 40 metres, and he'd taken this catch over the fence, and the umpire gave me out, and he Redpath said, "Oh, you said you called it a no ball." At the end of the day, he come in and he apologised. He said, "I'm sorry, Doug." He said, I didn't actually call no ball. He said, "I called no," and he dragged his foot back. So yeah, I guess some umpires are probably better off not saying anything.
Doug, I remember one time when you might have had good reason to be emotional because you got 100 in a session and you finished it off 1974 against England with a hooked 6 off Bob Willis, and you came into the dressing room and there was nobody there. Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, that was quite a day really, because Greg Chappell had just got out just prior to tea, and normally when a batsman meets another coming out, there are not too many words said. There's normally bad luck and a good luck exchanges, that's about it. But on this occasion, Greg said to me, he said, I got out so you could get 100 in the last session. And I thought, good joke. Well, I was 3 not out at tea, and I came into Greg and I said, what do you mean you got out so I could get 100 in the last session? I said, you've never given your wicket away, you wouldn't give your mother a bat. I said, you wouldn't do that. He said, yeah, he said, I got out so you get 100 in that session. Well, as it turned out, I did get the 100, and so I ran off the ground because I knew that was the last ball of the day, and expecting that the boys might have the top off a bottle by the time I got in there. Well, I run up the stairs in the dressing room, no one there, and so I'm taking my pads off up against near the bar, and I'd grabbed 2 bottles of beer out of the esky, and I had the opener in my hand when Ian Chappell walked out of the shower, and he said, he started abusing me about getting out off the last ball, and I said, yeah, good joke, Ian. I said, you going to take the tops off those 2 bottles, or am I? He said, no, he said, you shouldn't have got out off that last ball. He said, we needed you to get some more runs tomorrow. I said, are you going to take the tops off those 2 bottles, or am I? He said, no, he said, we needed you. With that, I flicked the tops off the 2 bottles. Well, the other boys have got pretty good hearing because they all flew out of their shower ablution block and came in to join. And I guess they opened a few more bottles after those 2. And I was out next day on a second ball I faced without adding to my overnight score. And I come running back into the room again the next morning. And I said, oh, you're all here today, eh? And I walked straight up to Ian Chappell and I said, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today.
Thanks, Doug. We'll just take a break, and when we come back, we'll have a close look at the magnificent Test career of one of Australia's favourite cricketers, Doug Walters. He scored 250 in a Test in New Zealand, but didn't get a lot of publicity at the time, perhaps because New Zealand was sort of regarded as a lesser Test-playing nation, but that must have been one of the best innings you've ever played.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that wicket was very much like an English wicket. It was quite a seaming wicket. Richard Hadley was probably in his prime during that time. And it was certainly probably the worst 20 runs ever scored, my first 20. But after that, the bowlers started aiming more at the middle of the bat and hitting it more often. And yeah, I guess they grew in confidence, and away I went again.
You used a very light bat, didn't you?
Very light, yeah. I think the problems with a lot of children, a lot of kids these days is that mum and dad, they spend a lot of money buying them bats, but they buy them too big and too heavy. And the bat that I used, yeah, the lighter the better. £2.3, £2.4 was the maximum that I used.
And you always seemed so fit, Doug, and yet there were these stories about you smoking and drinking and late nights and cards. And yeah, when you ran through the outfield, you were as quick as anyone round, so obviously you did put a bit of work in.
Yeah, I trained as hard as anyone else in the hours that they put down for training. I mean, I was first at practice and last to lead more often than not. A lot of people are under the impression that I didn't practice. Well, that's not true. I mean, I didn't practice on the morning of the game. I think that's where a lot of the stories come from. I think in my second Test, or third Test, Bill Laurie and Bob Simpson walked out of the dressing rooms with the pads on, and I bowled them for an hour and 3/4 and didn't get a hit. And I thought, well, this is pretty stupid, going out to practice on the morning of a match, and I'm in the side as a batsman, not a bowler. Wearing yourself out before the game starts, I don't see any sense in that. So, yeah, very seldom did I get out there on the actual morning of a match because, well, I never got a bat.
It was extraordinary how people warmed to the way you played the game, though. And when it came to the end of your career in 1980-81, New South Wales Cricket Association gave you a benefit year. It was the first time in 123 years they'd done that, and they had the Doug Walters stand. Did you actually make any money out of that benefit?
No, well, we made a little bit of money, but I mean, it was what we did make. It was a bonus. We didn't make a lot of money, but there's a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of effort went into it, and I appreciated all those that put the time and efforts into it. But yeah, I guess that made it a little bit harder too to concentrate on cricket out every night of the week.
It was amazing when you were omitted from the 81 tour of England. Such was your following at the time. There were protest marches, there were questions in Parliament, there was a selector who even got a death threat. Were you aware of this swell of opinion? Were you disappointed at not going on that tour, or had you had enough?
No, I was disappointed, sure. I mean, I would have liked to have had another crack at England under my new style, so be it at the time, just to see whether it would have worked or not. Well, I watched the tour with pretty great interest, and the wickets weren't all that good during that tour. So I think towards the end, I decided, well, maybe it was a good idea not to be on that tour anyway. And I had a winter to think about it, and I wasn't getting any younger, and I thought, well, now is the time. So that's when I packed up.
Everyone knows Doug Walters, the cricketer. Not many know Doug, the man. You've got two nicknames, Bicky and Freddie. How did that come about?
Well, Bicky was the first one. Peter Philpott, I think, was the guy that called me Bicky. I was playing for New South Wales when they had a keeper called Doug Ford, and they used to call him Little Dougal. Well, every time they also called me Little Dougal, and every time they called me the other Little Dougal, Doug Ford answered. And he said, "No, not you, Little Dougal, Tiny Little Dougal," referring to me. And well, Doug Ford started answering to Tiny Little Dougal as well. I said, "No, not you, Tiny Little Dougal, itsy bitsy Tiny Little Dougal over there." Well, it was the time that that song was on the hit parade, Itsy Bitsy Tiny
Teeny Weeny, yeah.
Bikini.
Yeah.
And Peter said, well, we haven't got time to use all these things. If a catch goes up in the air, we haven't got time to say it's not yours, Tiny Weeny Little Dougal, it's yours, Itsy Bitsy. So we'll just take the Bicky out of the bikini, we'll call him Bicky, and we'll go back to calling you Little Dougal. So that stuck for a long while, and those guys that I played with during that era still call me Bicky.
Yeah.
And then along come Freddie. Well, I'm not 100% sure, but Ian Redpath was a guy that always called me Freddie. He was the first to call me Freddie. He reckoned when I run into bowl, I used to look like Freddie Truman, but he reckoned the comparison stopped when I got to the crease. I couldn't agree more with that. And yeah, so I'm Freddie to those that I played later with, and I'm still Bicky to those that I played earlier with.
I can't recall seeing you in a helmet, perhaps once or twice in World Series. Did you ever get sconned?
Yeah, I used a helmet the second year of World Series cricket. We went over to New Zealand to have some practice, a couple of practice games, and we were actually practicing at a university, I'll never forget. And the wicket was quite wet, and the ball was bouncing around everywhere. And I thought, well, if ever I'm going to use a helmet, I'm going to wear one in this net today. And I borrowed someone's helmet. And Gary Gilmore, the first ball I faced, was a good length, and I went to drive it, and it just flew and it hit me right there. And I nodded it back to Gary Gilmore, who caught it on the full, and it hurt. And in fact, I had a bruise across my forehead for the next 2 weeks. And I thought, well, lucky I had the helmet on. But the next ball he bowled me again. It was in the same similar position. And I went to drive it, and it flew again, and it hit the visor on the window in the corner of the nets. And I thought, now the first one would have killed me, the second one would have broken my jaw. These helmets are not as silly as they sound. And from there on, every game that I played after that, I always had a helmet on, whether it was a spin bowler bowling or a quickie or a medium pacer or what.
I loved watching you play spin, and you seem to really enjoy it, even against the greats like Lance Gibbs, for example. Did you feel more comfortable against spin than pace?
At certain times. I suppose the wicket has a lot to do with it. And I don't think anyone can honestly say that they enjoy facing extreme fast bowlers. I was no exception to that. But some medium paces or medium fast bowlers on good wickets, I mean, you don't mind batting against them either. But spinners, yeah, I did have probably a preference to playing spinners.
I met your wife Caroline when we went to China on a goodwill bicentennial trip in 1988 to teach the Chinese children all about cricket. And I wondered if Caroline is a cricket lover.
Well, she was. She had to be. And I guess to this day she still has a glance at the television, sees what's going on. As I said, we've got 3 boys that are out there every Saturday afternoon, still playing. So I don't think she's quite as keen as what she used to be. So she hasn't got to be quite as keen as she was in her terms.
I remember the great Doug Walter's footwork wasn't quite so good on that trip when we were on a junk, and you actually slipped and fell off the junk into the Hong Kong harbour. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I certainly remember that very vividly. I mean, we had one of our sons on that trip, and that was the reason. That was the reason for my little sojourn around the side of the junk. It started to get a bit rough on the way back from those islands, so I thought I'd just go up the front and give him a hand back. Well, I never quite made it. The boat hit a wave and went one way, and I went the other way. And fortunately, I mean, there were a lot of people, and you hear a lot of stories, but there were probably about 60, 70 people on that junk, and I was at a dinner a couple of years later, then 100 people saw me fall off that junk. Well, I can assure you there was only one person saw me fall off the junk, and this of course, was about 11:30 at night. So, and falling into Hong Kong harbour, probably 2 miles away from shore, is not the best place to be. But fortunately, the only guy that did see me go was the fellow that was driving the junk, and he pulled it up pretty quickly, I can assure you. But I went pretty close to hitting the bottom of that harbour.
What impressed me, Doug, was your dedication to your employers, because when you came to the surface, you still had the Tui's 2.2 and the Rothmans, and you worked for both of them at various stages during your life, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I worked for Rothmans for 15 years during my playing career, and later I've had a good association with the brewery, with Tui's particularly. Yeah, I've drunk a lot of their products.
What a job that was. How did that come about? There were the ads with Max Walker, I remember.
Yeah, well, they wanted to introduce this light beer to us, and they thought, well, you better come out and do a test. So I went out there one breakfast out to the brewery, and they said, well, we want you to drink as many of these as you can in an hour and put you on the breathalyzer machine and see how you figure. Well, I done quite a lot, and I hardly registered at all on the machine. So they said, well, okay, you're in. You've got the job. So, yeah, I remember going out to the brewery. They said, bring your diary up. We want you to go down to Melbourne. We want to release this 2.2 in Melbourne. So bring your diary here. With the first 2 weeks you've got available, there's nothing else on, we'll take it down to Melbourne. Well, we went down to Melbourne and released 2.2, and I must have done something right, because that 2 weeks went for 2.5 years. I was backwards and forwards every week for 2.5 years in Melbourne.
Who are your favourite current batsmen?
Oh, I think all of them. I mean, particularly Mark Waugh and Adam Gilchrist. I mean, they sort of play in the same sort of line, I suppose, as myself, Ricky Ponting and Damien Martin. I think we've got a fantastic Australian side, have had for quite a few years now, and well, let's hope we've got some replacements coming along in a few years' time, or a couple of years' time.
Who was the best bat in your era?
Well, Sobers was, Sir Garfield Sobers was the best batsman that I played against, there's no doubt about that. Certainly the best all-rounder, but I put him ahead of the list as far as just batting is concerned.
And bowling? Who was the best bowler?
Lilly, Dennis Lilly was, he'll do me any time. He fortunately was on my side more often than against, but he was a great competitor.
This might be a hard one. Who was the funniest teammate you had?
I guess they're all funny in their own ways. I mean, Ashley Mellett was funny in his way, and Rod Marsh, I suppose, was a guy that I probably had more to do with on and off the field than a lot of the other guys. Yeah, I guess everyone's got their funny moments, has their funny moments.
Did you have a favourite music? A lot of cricketers like listening to music to relax, did you?
Well, I'm a country and western man. Just because I come from the country, I suppose. But yeah, country and western is my style of music.
Any superstitions?
None, not any that any other cricketers don't have. I mean, we all put our left pads on first, and that sort of thing. And I guess my superstitions was just to pat down that patch on the wicket that didn't need patching down, but I guess we all do something to fill in the odd second or two.
If you could change anything, Doug, anything at all about the world, what would it be?
Oh, I'd like to see the world in peace. I don't know whether I'll ever see that happen, unfortunately, because, well, there's always one trouble spot in the world, and there seems to be several trouble spots in the world. That would be my aim if I was high up, to try and establish peace, not only in the world but certainly in Australia.
Doug, I've always been an unashamed Doug Walters fan, but to sit and chat with you like this has just been like watching a vintage Dougie ton. Thanks a lot for being with us on Superstars and Legends.
It's been my pleasure, Peter. Thank you.